When you're alone and life is making you lonely, you can always go downtown.
Last Night in Soho, Edgar Wright's groundbreaking psychological thriller, is a stunning and visually engaging story bringing 1960s Soho back to life. But despite the impressive skill displayed in the film's production and its high reviews, it was received with a middling box office, barely making back half of its budget. Why is that? Let's get into it. Welcome to the Hollywood Scholar. I'm Jed Morgan, and I quite enjoyed Last Night in Soho, intimately connecting with the film's lead and relating to her plight. As someone who struggled with similar issues of depression and loss, having written about many of these issues myself, I felt like I was Ellie, embracing her performance and seeing myself within her. An example of how you don't need to look like someone to relate to them. It's their story and their struggles that draws the audience in to relate to them. From a dazzling aesthetic to brilliant performances from Thomasin McKenzie, Anna Taylor-Joy, and Matt Smith, Edgar Wright brings this vibrant world to life. The flashing colors and smiling people covering a seedy dark underworld filled with blood, depression, lust, and suicide. He draws the audience in and uses inspired camera work to translate the characters' mental states and thoughts to the audience with limited dialogue, building up in a slow burn to some surprising twists. And spoilers ahead. Last Night in Soho follows Ellie, an aspiring fashion designer who moves from the British countryside to London for fashion school. Raised by her grandma after her mother's suicide, Ellie grew up hearing romantic tales of the 60s and listening to old records on her grand's lap, fantasizing about that magical decade and all the possibilities held within it. This simple country girl is soon overwhelmed by the big city, devastated by bullies and crass people, compiled upon mountains of schoolwork. When she's almost given up, she finds a mysterious note for a flat for rent in Soho, free from the incorrigible youth of her classmates. Her first night in her new flat opens her up to a world of dreams, reliving the life of Sandy, an aspiring singer in the 60s who falls in with a bad crowd. Each night, more of Sandy's life is revealed, drawing Sandy and Ellie deeper into madness, the repercussions soon echoing into Ellie's real world, the dreams nearly indistinguishable from reality. It seems like Sandy's manager and pimp, Jack, killed her in rage and covered it all up, making the story about a girl's ghost calling out through the decades to Ellie for help. In investigating Sandy's death to find the killers, the ghost of Sandy's many abusers haunt Ellie in the land of the present, constantly clawing at her, trying to tell her something. When Ellie's prime suspect is killed because of her, and proved innocent by it, Ellie gives up, deciding to flee town. When she goes back to the flat to gather her stuff, her suspicious landlady offers her tea and a chat, and the truth is revealed. The landlady was Sandy the whole time. She turned serial killer to slay all her abusers and get revenge for the innocent girl within her that had been murdered so long ago. Sandy tries to kill Ellie to keep her secret, and in the fallout, the flat catches fire, freeing the bodies of Sandy's victims from the walls and floors of the flat as they beg for help to be free, beg Ellie to kill Sandy, which she refuses. Sandy is forced to confront her past and see what she has become, allowing a brief moment of redemption, sparing Ellie and waiting to die in the flames, refusing to go to prison, yet still accepting punishment for her sins. As a country boy with high school suicidal tendencies who moved to the big city to find meaning, overcome my depression, and leave behind years of sexual abuse, this story spoke to me on a fundamental level that I haven't gotten from Hollywood in many years. Its depiction of depression and suicide feels accurate to my own journey. Your life feels like a world of mirrors, every action somehow detached from yourself, distorted, your body merely puppeted by another, and just out of reach from your true self. The aesthetic fuels this cracked view of reality, from Ellie's detachment from Sandy, the warped view of glass and mirrors, to the flashing lights and stark colors filtering reality into fantasy. An impossible dreamlike state where anything is possible. First hopeful and bright, then corrupted and dark. The masterful cinematography also added to this disjointed view of life, seamlessly moving between Sandy and Ellie, blurring the line between them as the lines between their personalities also merged. Diluting reality even further, the passage of time was very unclear. Another staple of my depression at least. Without clear markers between the apathy and the torment, it feels like there is no relief or release, further distorting your perception of reality, making it harder to cling on to something, to clasp onto and pull yourself out of the dark. Beyond just the allegory and the aesthetic, the city itself feels alive, shimmering with hopeful promise before diving into shadowy malice. Without explicit or overbearing changes, choosing subtlety over bombastic action, Edgar changes the tone drastically, with simple tweaks, perfectly showing the truth behind the glamour of Soho, going from romantically hopeful to corrosively vile, its veneer degrading at an equal pace to Ellie's descent into madness. The 60s and the present merging more and more. Another interesting thing the film addresses is the corruption found within the entertainment industry, of which many of today's Hollywood adult pretenders, who virtue signal all day, participate in. There's a fundamental truth that sex sells. Sometimes it's good, like Game of Thrones and sexy superhero costumes, and sometimes it's bad. Sex can be an escape, as Ellie tries to use it as with John, or a prison as it was for Sandy. Sex is neutral, a tool that can be used well in a story, or emptily. Hollywood has been very confused by this in the past, desexualizing as many women as they can while doing the opposite to men, while also letting a show like Game of Thrones dominate for nigh a decade. This film definitely leans far more into the sex as negative side of storytelling, but it works perfectly for the story and is exactly what the film needed. From a meta sense, I wish we had more egalitarian approach to sex in Hollywood these days, but that's not the film's fault. It did what it needed to tell its story. Despite its sad box office, it's been received with relatively high reviews from both fans and critics. Some praise it for good reasons, and others for woke ones. Now, normally I would disregard critics' opinions outright because they normally focus in on the political elements of a story and erase any staple of good storytelling, good character work, things that fans would enjoy, stuff like that. But in this case, it's not as divergent between fans and critics as it normally is. That may be for good reasons, that may not be. Let's take a look at the fans' response first. 90%, that's quite good. And 75%, that's lower than I would have expected, so that might be more in line with my customary opinion that critics should not be listened to these days. But let's read a few of these audience scores. One of the worst of the year of bad movies. Is of course never going to be 100%, and I'll get into it later, but I understand why people would dislike this movie. There are some things in it that I had a problem with that weren't enough for me to take away from my enjoyment, but I totally understand why it would for somebody else. It is a very niche film. Movie was awesome. Haven't been to the theater in a while. A good welcome back flick. Twist was clever. If Hitchcock made a movie in 2021, this is what he would have created. That's actually quite a high praise. A great film. Completely shocked and awed. Brilliant movie that successfully crosses genres, topped with excellent performances and ambitious cinematography. Not to mention, it was a great story to follow and engage with. Yeah, there's a lot of great 5-star reviews. A lot of great ones. Good, but too many men. I'm not sure what that means whatsoever. The cast was mostly women, so I don't know what the Honey is trying to say. The cinematography was so good. Many times the scenes felt like mini trailers for this exciting thriller. I thoroughly enjoyed every minute while wanting to compare it to The Promising Young Woman. I never saw that. Yeah, that whole page is mostly positive besides this top one. Now let's take a look at the critics. The positive ones in here I worry are out of political reasoning rather than good storytelling, because you could definitely paint a political motivation behind the story aspects of it. But let's read them real fast. In this more critical, subversive nostalgia, this film suggests that the alliance between women could reshape how we make music and art today. That dips a little bit into the feminist side of the politics that I don't agree with, but not too bad. This audaciously original time-traveling thriller, everyone says it's time travel, but it's technically not. Yeah, a lot of people are saying that. I don't get that. With the plot too complicated and twisted to explain in a few sentences, wasn't exactly a crowd-pleasing hit, but please do yourself a favor and stream it soon. Alright, pretty basic. This film circles around 1960s romanticism with expert prowess, making space for scares and heart, all while offering audiences an exceptionally good time. Unfortunately, the journey itself is too predictable and undercooked. I obviously disagree with that, but there is an argument for that, which I will go into later. It's weirder and more ambivalent than The Past is Terrible, Don't Be Tricked by It, and it's that ambivalence that makes it so beguiling. Yes, and that is an interesting point. It's not straight up The Past is Terrible, Don't Be Tricked by It. There is a lot of complexity to it, and I really appreciated that in the film. It seems way more negative than, it's definitely way more negative than the audience's side was. I suppose it looks impressive, but the plot made no sense. It did, if you were paying attention. It's not all that complicated. You just have to wait to the end for all the pieces to fall into place. Yeah, nothing really out of the blue here. A lot less political motivated reviews than I was expecting. More just they couldn't understand it, which was a staple of Christopher Nolan as well with Tenet. Everyone was just like, I can't understand it, which there wasn't anything in Tenet that I super didn't understand, but that seemed to be their main criticism of the film, was its complexity, and their praise for it more the aesthetic. So a lot less politically divisive than I would have originally expected from a film that had such opportunity for a political bandwagon to be jumped on. I know it sounds like I blindly loved this film, but there were some stark flaws and confusing questions raised along its run. The big purple elephant in the room was if the film is woke, feminist, or political, as so much of Hollywood is. With the current state of Hollywood, I won't blame anyone for seeing phantom woke pains in this film and refusing to watch it because of them. There's been so much political garbage recently that it's hard to believe that there might be something good in a female-oriented vein. I personally don't believe the film was overly woke or political, but there were some extreme scenes that could lead to that conclusion. Its portrayal of predators is complicated. Dangers are around a lot of corners for people in the slums and seedy districts of big cities, which is understandable and supports the story. But it displays all but one man, who's a bit of a beta, as predators. A men-bad approach is important to the story structure, but did get very old very fast. If this film existed in a Hollywood where you could have an equal film with lots of bad women, this wouldn't be as big of a deal, but that's not the Hollywood we have today. It's a bit of old hat at this point to hate men. I would care about this a lot more if it was as poorly written as most of Hollywood has displayed stories like this in the past. The thing that seals this as not woke for me is the script still condemns Sandy for her actions and murders, painting her as evil yet redeemable. She's still wrong. Woke would have made her right in the end. In the end, I'm okay with a message I disagree with, in support of a well-written story by a talented writer to support compelling characters. The film had some more minor issues like rather predictable plot twists, classic cliches, Silverhair being a generic villain, and some straight-up plot holes, like, why are we seeing the past through Sandy's eyes if she's not the ghost communicating with Ellie? Why would old Sandy rent out a room where she buried dozens of bodies? A simple accident could uncover everything. Ellie is not at all curious about what causes her visions, nor is scared up front. Why did Ellie see a fake murder vision of Sandy getting killed when all her other visions were accurate or atmospheric? It just serves to distract Ellie and drag out the plot. Why did they go to the trouble of showing John walking barefoot through the broken glass if they never bring up his injuries again? In the end, these are all minor issues that didn't really take away from my enjoyment of the film.
I'm sorry I'm a little late.
A little doesn't quite cover it.
I've got a feeling you'll forgive me.
Matt Smith is an international treasure and deserves far more credit than he gets. He's the only reason I was interested in this film up front, the only reason I watched it. He's my Doctor, and his performance and tenure on Doctor Who is my favorite run of my favorite show. Matt beautifully telegraphs Jack's change from generous and heroic talent manager to manipulative pimp, showing genuine caring to cunning trickster. His character shows extreme intelligence by the reveal that he was friends with a drunk guy that harassed Sandy, suggesting that he may have set her up by having a pre-made trap for any potential talent. It was baffling to see the heartfelt and quirky 11th Doctor playing this dark and looming figure, striking fear into those beneath him. An impressive performance from a talented actor.
The bartender said I should get to know the handsome fella standing next to Cilla Black.
You should. And you are?
The next, Cilla Black.
Anna Taylor-Joy delivered a compelling performance of a hopeful and confident girl descending into utter insanity. She brings the 60s to life, letting us see her world through her romantic and driven lens. And her singing was incredible, beautifully conveying her emotions and the depth of the dream that led her there. Her degrading mental state is perfectly delivered to the audience through subtle changes, before evolving to full-blown, chattering, murderous madness. You feel bad for Sandy, yet still disagree with her actions. And Dinah Rigg carried Anne's performance into the present, displaying a sullen, broken woman with a slim chance of goodness left. Capable of slight redemption, yet not enough to live well again.
You're like so brave.
So brave. Yeah, I had a great uncle commit suicide, hung himself.
Oh God.
So yeah, I know exactly what it's like.
Also so brave.
The other side characters fulfilled their purpose in the story, but still didn't stand out all that much. Nearly all the side characters were utter dicks, with just a sliver of goodness and hope of getting better within them. Just like real people. No one is truly evil, even the villains and predators. The silver-haired man was a bit of a generic villain, and the script begs you to think he's Jack in the modern day. The twist that he wasn't Jack was well set up and predictable at the same time, with subtle lines and hints that he's an ex-cop. But the film literally put Matt Smith's face on top of his to make you and Ellie connect them. It was just really conflicting and erratic a lot of the time. This isn't the actor's fault. Terrence Stamp did a great job with what he was given, and he's given great performances in other films and shows that I've loved. But his inclusion in the film felt like a literal red herring. Sam Califf also gave a great performance as the young silver-haired man, perfectly imitating Terrence's line delivery. John was really distracting and annoying at first, but he quickly grew on me as we got to know him. By the end, I was actually worried about him when he got stabbed. In the end, he was an important addition to the film. Jocasta was more than just a generic bully. She was a compelling and complex cunt. Goodness and fear hidden underneath her brashness and need for power. The actress did exactly what she needed to, and made us believe that Ellie would run from her. Ellie was me. I was her. If you change the 1960s to real-life Doctor Who, there was a time in my life that I would have made the same decisions as her, and been drawn into this other world just to escape my darkness. The very opening of the film introduced us to Ellie with limited dialogue, yet immediately giving the audience everything they needed to decide if they were going to like and connect with her, concisely displaying her character traits and goals. Thomasin McKenzie is a rising star in Hollywood with brilliant performances in Jojo Rabbit and Old before this, and she deserves all the work and attention that she's getting. She played 4 very distinct versions of Ellie that seamlessly shifted together to show her arc, from shy country girl to confident designer inspired by her visions, to depressed and fearful maniac, to balanced human at the end. Her fall from grace and slowly eroding confidence beautifully drew me in and made me feel for her and connect with her journey. Ellie was already a sensitive person. From her depression and strong emotions to the ability to see ghosts, she was perfectly primed to receive the message of the Soho flat and solve the several decades-old crimes. She's also the literal embodiment of brilliance comes hand in hand with pain and torment of the mind. In conclusion, I loved every second of this film and have to give it an 8 out of 10. Yet I realize that it's a very niche film, and most audiences won't connect with it as intimately as I did. It's not for everyone. So if anyone's on the fence on the film, you should definitely check it out. It's an impressively made visual masterpiece, perfectly portraying the struggles of a depressed person dealing with sexual abuse. I cannot recommend it enough.
There are lots of bad guys, I'll be careful. They're bad apples. I'm scrappy, I can take 'em.
London can be a lot. It was too much for your mum, perhaps. She didn't have your gift.
My gift?
She didn't feel things, see things like you do.
But it's not just that I need to do this for me. I really want to. For her.
Anyway, that's all I have for today, so please like, share, and subscribe, and I will see you on the next video. Anon. If you like what I do here and want to see good, compelling stories that Hollywood will no longer give you, check out my book series, Odyssey of a Phoenix, a mythological epic about philosophy, morality, and modern-day mental illness issues. Books 1, Down in Flames, and Book 2, Apocalypse Then, currently on sale. Book 3, Kill the Dark, coming soon.